Hello everybody and welcome back to another On the Workbench session. We're going to do some oils here and we're going to try some object source lighting. Going to try and maybe kill two topics with one medium. We want to try to do some black as well. As you can see in the reference picture there, that just seemed to kind of look a lot like this character here. Very similar in fact. And I thought, well, we can do our object source lighting, but we can also mess around with some black here. I think that could be very fun, trying out some different ways of achieving that black. And I'm thinking maybe the hair either is going to be like a dark blue or something, maybe not entirely black. This figure is from Succubus Publishing. They've done a recent Kickstarter campaign, and there's, I think, about 10-ish figures or so that are part of that campaign. We have some of the other ones, and these are actually previous Twitch sessions that I've done here. This one was actually done in acrylics. I did this using a lot of Reaper colors that I didn't even know I had. They just had come from ReaperCon. I just kind of gathered those up and we did something with this. And this was done in oils on another Twitch session right here. And both of these, they are going to be made into YouTube videos, so you can check out how those played out. We're going to set those off to the side here. I've got another one somewhere that it's maybe about 2/3 done, something like that. Here we go. This is another one of those Succubus Publishing things. Again, with the object source lighting. And we also, on this one, we were trying out one of our new colors, and that is Cobalt Violet. And yes, it finally has a label. We actually have another Cobalt here that has its label, and we're going to try both of these out right here. Cobalt Blue, Cobalt Violet. Now, something to keep in mind is that these are one of the more transparent blues. So most blue tends to be transparent, pretty much with the exception of, and yes, even indigo has a label now. These are two of your more non-transparent blues right here. Indigo is going to be a big part of what we're doing, especially on our darker colors. Now we also are going to have the fluorescent green out here, because as you can see with the reference there, it has a little bit of a greenishness to that object source lighting. Now we do have some of our other colors here. We've got some umbers, we've got our Payne's gray. I want to have those out here so that we can have some, well, obviously not just other colors in our black, but we want to do something too with this base. This was actually a 3D printed base. Of course, we're going to be using our number 8 round craft brushes here. And as always, you've got regular oil paint like this mixed with either the Mona Lisa spirits if you're in the, or basically thinner if you're in the US, and this from MIG Ammo. In Europe, you should be able to find this. These two are pretty similar. Obviously, this is a favorite of mine. The MIG Ammo stuff is about as close as you are going to get. And you mix those together in a container just a little bit. Let me see if I can dig one of these out here, if I might. And you just dig your brush into, like this was, I was just doing some ivory black here. You put your paint in there, you get your brush in there, you get a little bit of that thinner, and you keep mixing until they have the consistency of miniature paint. And the idea is once you get that consistency the way you like it, you get your pewter chunks in there or a steel agitator. You might want to go with glass, though. I'm starting to hear that some of those cheaper steel agitators don't really do quite what you want them to do. They kind of maybe rust and tarnish over time. But again, you can hear that sound. That's your agitator, and that keeps it going. Over here on the palette, titanium white, Payne's gray, raw umber, burnt umber, indigo, cobalt blue, cerulean blue. There's your fluorescent green, cobalt violet, brown madder, terra rosa, and there is your yellow ochre. We might add another color or two over the course of time, but I try to keep these in the general same place because I know these four look very much alike. They do to me visually as well. I mean, I have to know that's where Payne's gray usually is. That's where indigo usually is. Now, olive green typically goes in here, but we don't need necessarily all of those colors. I think with all the blues that we have over here, I think we're all set. Speaking of being all set, I think we've got our paint on in the palette. what we are going to do next is we're just going to do that little bit of a pre-glaze. It'll be a little bit different because of our object source lighting over here just a bit. We're just going to hit all of these darker colors here. We want to get some warmer stuff going on down here. So that is going to be our next task, some of that pre-glaze. As I mentioned, this will be slightly different than our usual form of pre-glaze because we don't want to have to undo too many things when it comes to our object source lighting here. Now we are going to take our thinner here that's in this container. We're going to get some of that out on the palette here. And this will start a little bit like usual. We're going to take some of our indigo here, some of this raw umber, because it's a little bit more of a greenish umber. Take a little bit of our Payne's gray too. You can see this is not necessarily in that 90% range as far as mixing the thinner in there. It's not necessarily running around all over the place, but it is fairly transparent. Because all we want to do is just get a little bit of a tint here, and more importantly, even just to get some color on it. Just a little bit of hint of color. And we're going to go, this is about as far as we will go with that. Now we're going to switch this around here. We're taking some of our raw umber, or burnt umber now, because that's got a little bit more of a redishness to it. And that's going to go on the underside here, because we're thinking the top section would probably be a more cooler color because of the, not just the light from the sword, but maybe just the ambient light. It's a little bit cooler. And then everything in the shadow area might be warmer because, well, I think we're going to be focusing on some warmer colors down in here. Another thing that I always advise, if you've got, and we always recommend working on multiple figures at once. If you've got other figures, say, sitting around up here, you want to have some kind of a, let's just call it a splash guard of some type, because those paint spatters will find their way up there. So, piece of cardboard, just any old thing, whatever, just to kind of keep if you've got miniatures on your table, you don't want to have them just sitting out and exposed to potential spatter. That would not be a good thing. We don't want that. It's something that I used to do with my acrylic stuff too. It's not anything unique to the oils. It's, with these techniques here where we're kind of taking some color that is relatively thin and applying it like this, well, it can spatter a bit. It happened with the watered down acrylics. It'll happen with the watered down oils too, or liquefied oils, if that's what you want to call them. That's going to really be handy with this cloak, is because of that ability to, nowadays just call it blind blend, where I just going to take the brush and stick it in there with the lighter color and just say, look, do some blending for me. I think that's going to be about it as far as what's on here. Look at, you can see the spatters right there on that base. That's what I'm talking about. Now here we are going to take some, this is much more the umber over here. I know it's a little bit blocked by the cloak. We're even going to take a touch of that brown matter, make it even more of a reddish. I am not actually going to have this lantern glowing because, well, you'd sort of have the Mrs. O'Leary's cow effect going on right there, kicking over a lantern in the barn. And being from Chicago, we don't really like cows kicking over lanterns in bars, or barns, or bars for that matter. We're just looking to establish some darker tones. Now, I will say, in a recent Twitch session, I did a little experiment where I think I was doing this pre-glaze stuff on about maybe 4 miniatures. I think it was 4 miniatures. The difference was, instead of doing the pre-glaze and then immediately going in with the sponges, I actually waited. Till all 4 of them had that pre-glaze on there, and then went back around to the first one. And I don't necessarily even know how to say what the results were, as far as was it really that different or not. I think it was a little different. Letting that color just, like we always say with the oils, right? Just let them sit there for a while, leave them in the proving drawer. So we are going to just grab our paper towel. We always have plenty of these handy, and we're not rinsing out the brush. We are just doing this, just literally wiping it off on the paper towel. That's all we are doing. And for the heck of it here, take a little bit of this cobalt blue, touch of the cerulean blue, and we will consider this part of our pre-glaze as well. You notice it hasn't been super watered down. Well, your cobalt blue is thin enough. And this is another one of those colors that's going to be on the pricey side. Cerulean blue, I mean, it's more expensive than maybe just the average color, but not by a lot. The cobalt blue, cobalt violet, that's a little bit different. I did just want to give you a sense of what those can do, and because I also would like to know, is it really worth it? Is it worth it spending that kind of money on these, or are you better off with one of the hues? And if it ever says hue on it, as in HUE, that means you're getting, well, a watered down version of it. Whether it's the pigments, whatever, something is substituted there to make it less expensive. Now, even here, look, you can already see a little bit of a difference there. Then we're going to see a big difference as we start to take sponges and have at it like so. But look at the big difference there. As we take some of this away, you can see even just taking a little bit longer, and maybe this being not quite as liquid as other times where you've seen me do the pre-glaze, you get a little bit different results, more of it staying behind. It doesn't really make much sense to take a whole bunch of it away, only to put a bunch of darker colors back in there. We also have sponges that have been same sponge, just cut down into shapes where I can actually get these into these other areas here. Again, I don't want to say minimal removal of paint, but less than usual, maybe. Maybe a little less than usual. It's already given us a nice little tint there. This would be like a blue liner, brown liner, if you're talking Reaper equivalents. And here, this would potentially be something like the clear blue. And we've done some of the pre-glaze with the Reaper paints in the past with some of the clears, not just the liners, but with some of the clears as well. You notice I don't mind removing a little bit more of it over here since, well, this is where our object source lighting will go, even here. So we've got ourselves a nice little establishment of our pre-glaze here. Now, I would even, in ideal circumstances, heck, I'd wait 15 minutes before I ever even started putting paint on this thing. However, we're not going to do that. We're just going to dive right in here. And boy, this is, look at how beat up this number 8 is. Now, cleaning it, and I know I'm going to just start mentioning this in every episode here. Since the rubbing alcohol that I used to use to clean the brushes is always in short supply these days, this, however, is not. It's non-hazardous, it's low vapor, and it even works with acrylic stuff too. So to me, this is, and it does kind of restore the brushes a little bit. So this is all kinds of win right here. And this is available on Amazon or Dick Blick or a lot of places. And I'll just hit this brush right here because I don't know if we'll be using it too much more, but it does get the paint out of there. And it doesn't take very much either. That's kind of a nice thing. So here is nice flattened brush. We got that kind of filbert look, right? let's start to establish some kind of glow. We always want to establish the object source lighting as soon as possible, right? Also, listen, hear that sound? That is the sound of the brush being dried, as in sort of a dry brush, not necessarily a dry brush, but sort of a dry brush. You can see there's not a ton of paint on that brush, and that's important because this is going to mix with what's there. So look at, all of a sudden you kind of lose that dry brush look, and it's starting to blend already. Now you can see it's already picking up the paint that's on the figure. Even now, with this little paint is on here, it's picking that stuff up. We're going to continue here again. Look at, caress the brush. Don't crush the brush. You never want to crush the brush. That's no good. It's not good for the brush. It's not good for your result on your miniature either. Now we're going to swoop into some other sections here and get a little bit of our cerulean blue in here now. And you'll notice that cobalt blue is so transparent. That's why, another reason why I put in a little bit of the fluorescent green, give it a little bit of a boost, even though the fluorescent green is transparent too. Now, what I'm thinking about doing actually to help you guys figure, okay, so what oil paints are translucent? What oil paints are more opaque? I'm going to try and put a little bit of a coating on the label. So it would be something along the lines of, there's a circle, and if the circle is filled in, then it's a really opaque color. If the circle's open, well, it's a translucent color. So cobalt blue, that's going to get basically an open circle. Something like the cerulean blue is going to get maybe a half circle, half circle-ish. Now let's continue. Look at that. See, it's not overwhelming, but it does give it a touch of that blue. Like there's a little bit of blue reflecting there. I mean, where he's holding his sword, it's in a good spot. It was in a really good spot to do some object source lighting. And I thought, yes, I know we do a lot of it here. I really enjoy it. And there's an awful lot of figures that just kind of, I don't want to say they were sculpted with that in mind, but there's an awful lot of sculpts that sure as heck benefit from it. They sure as heck do. Even this, as neat as it would be if you just had a sword and you just painted him all black, how much more dramatic is it doing it this way? Just like those kind of Renaissance era paintings where you see the dramatic light source, that focal point of the dramatic light source. Now, speaking of drama here, we're trying to get a little bit of white, a little bit of our, I almost called it phthalo green. Actually, phthalo blue would have been my first choice for this, but I just wanted to try out the cobalt blue and see what would happen. So now look at this, we're already gently, very gently, looking a little bit lighter here. We can go lighter from this, definitely go lighter. We're not going to do that right now because we haven't hit any other colors on this. Face, I just realized there won't be any skin tones. It's all just going to be the sword here. That lighting. Now, I also want to have some different color temperatures. Meaning, okay, we got this green here, but I think it would be kind of neat if there was a little bit of that cerulean in some places, a little bit more of the cobalt, which is a reddish blue. I'm gonna just say maybe he's wearing gloves as well. Let's get a little bit more on his face here. And as I said, we can always add more. Less is more, and more is typically way too much. And we're gonna get, look at how much was in that brush for as dry as it looked, huh? Look at how much paint. I could practically scrape that off of there, put it back on the palette again. But this is what I really like about this. Look at how nice and flat that is. I'm going to take just a little bit more of your titanium white here, and look at how dry that is. It's really important. Very important for it to be that dry, but we got to go back and get some more. We can only get a few brush strokes out of it. Can only get a few strokes, then you got to go back. You have to get some more fresh paint, because you can see what I could do now in theory is I use the other side. A couple brush strokes for that. So, I mean, this is already not doing a shabby job of setting up your lighting. Could you do this with acrylics? Well, sure, we do it all the time. However, I think the difference is you get just so much more spontaneous blending. It's like spontaneous combustion just with blending. Get this a little later. Okay, so there is your glow mostly established. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this off into its own little segment here. So as soon as I feel like this is really established here, then we're going to stop this segment here, stop filming this part, and we are going to move on to things like the base, some of the warmer area. You know what? Actually, what we'll do is, well, for the rest of this, we're going to take some of this Payne's Gray here. And you'll notice, see how that's almost got a purple tone to it, whereas the indigo, that would be, well, it's not just that much darker, but oh my gosh, a little different, almost more of a greenish tone to it. We want something that's opposite all of that greenish blue, just like we did with the Dark Sword video, and I'll show you that guide too over the course of time here, because it's another kind of blue object source lighting here. So again, just trying to, there's more than one way to just establish an effect, and that's, yes, add the color and the lightness of it and everything else. Another way to establish that is with that color temperature differential, and that's what we're doing here, getting this warmer tone. So we're just kind of letting that mix in as much as possible with that pre-glaze. Now in areas where we want it to be a little darker, I am going to let the indigo get in, and boom, look at that. Doesn't take much, huh? Does not take very much. Very, very little. Get that going. I'm also seeing that, you know what, we got to hit, wow, I'm thinking there's some other areas that also need our object source lighting. Once again, we will take our paper towel here, get that paint out of that brush as much as we can. Let's go back to what we had over here, and obviously it's going to be relatively dry. It's not dry as in the paint is dry, it's dry as in there's not a whole lot of paint on the brush. And I'll probably get, look at that, one brush stroke, look how much came off. A second brush stroke, maybe a third, and then we'll blend it a little bit. So see how that's kind of catching some of our bluish light, and I think here too, I think we need to get some over here as well. I can, like I said, I can always go lighter. That's always an option. I mean, you can paint dark over the lighter colors too. I know there is this little bit of a mentality that in oils it has to be, light over dark. I used to think that with pastels. I thought that's how pastels were, and then I started to realize, no, it doesn't have to be. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. However, it can be done. So now, see that? We're catching a little bit of our, and I want it to be not super intense over here as far as catching the rest of that glow. Once again, going to take the paper towel, we're going to clean this off. I just remember art school, we would have just piles and piles and piles. We just called them paint rags. They were just paper towels. Very, very cheap paper towels, that sort of nasty recycled brownish paper towel. That's what we cleaned our brushes with. So I'm going to hit it now. Oh, look, again, got to go back, get some more here. Couple of brush strokes, that is it. And you notice I'm not even going to try and blend that at all because it's just going to dirty it up that much more. Couple of brush strokes, that's it. Come over here. Couple of brush strokes, that's it. I think we've got that pretty well established. We're going to get some of that paint out there. And as tempted as I am to just kind of wait and let this paint sit here, we're going to do a little bit of blending out. So see, we got this. You can see that real nice. Look at that. Bang. This is what makes cloaks. I mean, obviously, this is a spectacularly broad cloak with all kinds of flow to it. I would almost be tempted just to, for an oil paint class, somehow sculpt something like this, even just in bas relief, and have people paint something like this with the oils, and that would be their first practice with it. I mean, that's another reason why I saved this for the oils too, because I just thought, well, if you're looking for figures where it's easiest to, I don't know, take advantage of the aspects of oils, is this not it? I mean, look at all of the, man, none too shabby. So next up, we are going to start to hit the underside of the robe. We'll hit the bamboo right here, get obviously some warmer colors on that. We've pretty well established how much of the blue is going to go on there. So let's get our warmer colors on this guy, and we're going to do that next. Let's jump into these warmer colors now. We'll start off burnt umber, touch of our raw sienna here once again. Not sorry, raw sienna. Now it looks a lot like raw sienna. It's yellow ochre. Not a big difference value-wise. Color-wise, though, it is. I think, yeah, there, look at that. Big old difference there. And I'm going to let some of that work its way onto some of his clothes are, yeah, they're supposed to be black, but to make them more interesting, you have to have just a broader range than just a bunch of black or bluish gray. Got to be more than that. Has to be a little bit more than that for sure. Now, this will be hard to see. Now I'm going to go, we'll touch titanium white, some of our yellow ochre here. I want to just hit some of this, again, a little bit of the bamboo, that symbol that's there. Let it be as dry as possible. Even going to take some of that paint out of the brush here to go even drier. We will take just some of our titanium white here. You can see how much, even though we wiped out the brush, you can still see there's still stuff in there. Nice gentle brush stroke again, just dusting that over the top. It's a lot like a dry brush, but not a dry brush. It's the ultimate damp brush for sure because, well, you've got wet paint that you're utilizing here. Now, let's go. We're not even going to wipe out the brush. We're going to take some of this again, raw umber, burnt umber together, and whatever sort of sludge is in the brush, and let's do some warmer stuff here. It won't just be darker, but remember, we've got all that indigo that it's going to mix with. So we're already, I know it looks just plain old dark. Here, let's see if we can, we'll lighten this up a little bit more than we usually do. I think now you can, yep, you can see that little bit of a, see that bit of a warmer tone that's starting to hit there. And as always, minimal amounts of paint. You want just as little as possible. As little as possible. I will get some of this too on his pants as part of his outfit here. As much about getting some darks there as it is about making it, say, warmer. A little bit of a color transition. Okay, and just gonna make sure I can get in here. Now, if I'm gonna go a little bit later, so we're gonna take some of that same, look at this, there's so little of it. However, I'm thinking that when it hits this, you'll see a difference. And look at that. Yes, you do. Already makes a difference. That little tiny bit there. And it's really dark on the palette. However, when we put it over here, it looks a lot lighter just because we were successful in really establishing some rich, deep darks. So important. I'm just going to... This is where that blind blending comes in. I can barely see what the heck's going on. I can barely get the brush in there. But it doesn't matter. It'll blend anyway. So here's a little bit more of that titanium white. Now that we've got that warmer color in place, you can see how little there is. Look at that. Look at that nice little blend there, huh? Hashtag new layers. That's the advantage of the oils, that just you don't have to deal with layers. There is no layer 1, layer 2, and it just doesn't work that way. With the other, it didn't have to. If you're going to do that, well, just probably every single person, including me, watching this or doing this, has plenty of acrylic paints on hand. If I wanted to do stuff in acrylic, I could, because I have acrylic paints. I'm pretty sure we all do. I'm going to go a little, just another, yep, one little shot right there. We'll do that here. Yep. And if I need to do any kind of additional blending or softening of anything, that's where another brush can come along. Usually what we call those, we call them blending brushes. Just a touch more in there. Ah, that is just so nice to be able to do that. Again, the whole idea of this was to keep it in a more limited color range. Now we are going to get some... Ah, that's a nice angle for it. Let's get a bit more of the yellow ochre in it. But now we're going to change things up a little bit. We're going to get some of that Terra Rosa in there. The value's not terribly different. However, color's got a little bit more of a reddishness to it. Just a bit more of a reddishness. I'm even going to take some of this purple here. That's my cobalt violet, which I'm actually finding is kind of interesting in skin tones. See that? Now, it's not just a yellow. We're starting to get some more tone. We're always looking for more tones. We just don't want that same... If it was just that yellowish green everywhere, that's not really going to be... How interesting is that going to be? Not very much. I'm even going to let a little bit of this reddish brown get out here on the outer edges of that cloak. You can see it. It's about trying to achieve a touch of a reflection of the ground. And not a reflection like a mirror, not a reflection like metallic reflection or anything along those lines. but light bounces around. You'd be surprised. It's like a ping pong ball. I'm not quite sure if that's a Book of Wapple phrase right there. Light's like a ping pong ball. It bounces around a lot. But I suppose it could be. Maybe that just has to be. All right. We're going to white this one out here. We're going to go even lighter now, if we can. I'm going to take a little touch of that Terra Rosa here. It's almost like a super light flesh tone in a way. Get rid of some of that extra. Always looking to get rid of some of that paint. So that's so nifty. It's like a dry brush, however it's blended, because look at that. Look at how much, right to the side, look at how much of that paint you've picked up. This is the aspect of time savings that I just didn't anticipate. I did not expect that at all. And I'm going to let that be a more of a shadow there. And we'll hit this just a bit more with the, it's that titanium. It has a little bit of that Terra Rosa in there. I will also dust this over the so-called black parts here. And that now, see, it's starting to give me a little bit of a warmer shading over here. It's still pretty dark. It's still quite dark. We haven't even, there's nothing on here that is even white yet. And we can still go darker as well. I will still come in some of these darker areas with that indigo blue because it's just such a nice, deep, rich dark. And we're going to do the same thing. In fact, we might, no. What we'll do is we are going to actually dive into we always starting off with our craft brushes, right? Well, now we can go in with, and here's the brushes that you're going to just see a lot from now on. So we've got our Dick Blick here, again, the Poor Man's Series 7, and then you've got your Quadruple Zero, your Cotman. So we'll come in here. We will just put a few accents of lighter colors here. I do believe you can see, yeah, you can see in there. There has to be a little more definition in here. We can do that with our sable. And these sables that, as I've mentioned so many times, they don't really like the acrylic paints. When water hits them, they just tend to kind of puff up like SpongeBob SquarePants. But with the oils, since the thinners, well, it's not water. It's not even close to water. You get a much, much different result. And see, we could start to just pick out a couple of areas here. We'll maybe even take some of that paint away. And this will blend with some of the umbers that we put there, some of the Terra Rosa that we put there. Oh, you can see this. All I'm looking to do, just put some kind of a bit of a mid-tone here. And you can look at how it's, look at the difference. Look at that. That's how it started. Look at how much paint it picked up back there. And that's something you have to factor in with the oil paints. You want to pick up the paint that's already there, even as thin as we applied it. You're still going to pick up some of that stuff. We'll get our little lantern over here, give it some, maybe some light that's not necessarily blue. I'm going to go over here just for fun. We'll take some of that. And this is interesting, just how quickly the cobalt violet gets overwhelmed by the white. I'm still trying to figure out what does it do well? What's the best purpose for that cobalt violet? Is it just always going to be mixed with something else? Is that all it can really do? Or are there other things that it can do? I haven't found that out yet. I haven't had as many opportunities to use it. I'm going to get some of that over here too. Again, we're just looking for some differences here. Looking for some midtones. Midtones of a different color. And remember, we could even do some glazing. Let's say this dries. Let's say you're just to leave this for 12 hours-ish, something like that, 10, 12 hours, and it's all dry. You could go back over this and just glaze darker colors into this too. Just because the oil paint is dried, it does not mean that you should just kind of abandon it and then go to acrylics, because that's what I used to think that's what I'd have to do. And eventually I realized, no, that could not be further from the truth. It's almost better sometime. And just in some cases, if it actually dries, and then you can do some more traditional style glazing. You're gonna, speaking of that, indigo, take some of that indigo, a little bit of umber, just a bit. And there are some areas like over here, okay, on the other side of whatever this is. See how we just kind of restore a little bit of darker color there. A little bit of darker color here too. We know this should be a fairly substantial shadow area here. Look at how much lighter that looks with that shadow in place. Maybe a little bit of it here. Oh yeah, let's hit this here as well. We can go back in and blend some more of this stuff too. We always can. We're going to hit this with that darker indigo. Now that we've done that, I'm just going to take this. It has a little bit of lighter tone in it, see that? But look at how dry that is. And we'll let that blend in here too. I think the larger brushes, less paint, I mean, even the finer brushes are, well, somewhat bigger. And actually, this is going to maybe catch a little bit of this light over here. So, like there. A little bit of a change. Little bit of a change. Now we want to also umber and indigo. And we will, I think, yeah, we have to darken this. And we, all of a sudden, that gets brighter. By default, just by doing this, gets brighter. We've got some cobalt blue, and we're going to play with something here. See, this is where cobalt blue is kind of neat. So it is, obviously this is very thin down. See, look at what's starting to happen here. This is, we're going to use the transparency of the cobalt blue to our advantage here, as opposed to fighting that. As opposed to fighting that, we are going to try and use it. And all of a sudden, see, some of our object source lighting starts to change a little bit. We're toning it down in places. Look at that, even a little bit of that pin line wash. We'll let that kind of blend together with a few other areas. We're going to take away the paint again. Gonna get back in here with our indigo and umber mix to darken this down. And all of a sudden, once again, boom, darker. Now we have some more light there. Now we can always go back and lighten that up too. I guess I just want to let you know that there's plenty of options here. You're not just kind of stuck with one way of thinking about it. I would definitely prefer that people thought about the oils in a broader way. Obviously, there's a whole portion of people that just think that's all, they're just for weathering and nothing else. There's nothing else they can do. And that's very unfortunate because, as you can see, there's a lot more that they can do. There's a whole lot more they can do. There's a reason why there's many different colors of oils, because they can do more. Otherwise, there would just be rust colors and mud colors. And they never ever would have made any other. And I'm talking about just oils, period, over the course of history. They can clearly do more. Look at this. Again, see that cobalt blue? We could even maybe take a little bit of our fluorescent green, mix it with the cobalt blue here, so we have a couple of different glazes now. So what we're going to do in our next phase is this is the next thing we're going to work on. We're going to continue with some of these glazes right here on our object source lighting to create even more depth to it. And then we reverse course and we start to highlight things again. So we're going to continue these darker glazes on our object source lighting, and we're going to do that next. We're back at it again, and we are going to continue with this fluorescent green. Now, we haven't really put much of this in here. I want to see what that does with our color. So I've got a couple of different versions. This has a little bit more of the green. Obviously here, a little bit more of the cobalt. You have to be a little bit on the careful side here when you start doing these glazing things. Remember, if we just start brushing away at it, you are going to tear away the paint. I mean, literally just wash it away, and I'm pretty sure that's not what you want. I'm pretty sure the idea of this is to actually get paint onto this thing, not be taking it away. We're also looking to make sure the sword has some form of shape to it also. It can't just be all light. We have to have some form of shading and shape on this. So let's see what we can do with that. This has to be done pretty gingerly with these glazes here. And you can see, yes, it is, the color's got some liquidness to it, but you can see it's not running around all over the place. If that was running all over the place, what it would be doing is just wiping away everything that we've done. And that's not going to be super helpful. Not going to be real helpful. And by creating, see, look at how that's all of a sudden now a little more shape to this, instead of just what looks like some oil dry brushing. Now it looks like there's actually some color here. Some, even here, I don't necessarily want to say midtones, but there has to be shape somewhere. And then when we go in with something like the almost practically titanium white, that's going to make a difference. You'll really see it then. This is what I mean about those little color temperature changes. See how we've got, that's a little bit more green than the cobalt blue, which had very much a reddish sort of a tint to it. But you notice we have no white in this. There is no white in this. If there was, this would be a very different looking glaze. And I mean really different. So here, instead of brushing it, I actually just grabbed a little bit more of my thinner and did that. It's almost like if you were doing an acrylic glaze, instead of trying to move it around, you actually just grab a little bit of water and sort of thin it out and pull it. You can do that with the oils and not get a watermark. You couldn't really do that with the acrylics. I mean, you could. It's very tough though. Really, really tough to manage that. Let's get down here. Our lantern. Just going to establish a bit of some darker stuff here. I can even just take my finger and wipe some of that away. Now we're going to go even darker on this glaze now that we're down onto the ground here. Because we can get darker here too. This is... Look at how much darker we can get in those recesses. And now we're going to take this and do some darker glazing over here too on our flooring. But once again, it is that sort of panel line wash, the pin wash. Can even go in here and get some more of that thinner so that it really sinks down into the crevices. You can see that there, and it looks obviously very wet right now. You'll be surprised at how long it does not take for that to kind of lose that whole wet look. It really doesn't take much time. Now, indigo, some dark glazes of indigo here. Look at that. See how that just, we tap it there and we let that capillary action work on its own. Very important. Really a critical thing. I can't emphasize that enough. You have to just let the capillary action work itself in. Now, of course, it's easier when you have things that have fine details. You know, let's say you got something like a bones miniature. Well, that might be a different story. Might be a little tougher. Then maybe you just say, okay, we aren't going to do the whole, that type of glazing there. We won't do that in that area. We'll do something else. Now I'm going to go back in here with some of my, again, that looks cerulean in here now. And actually I'm going to get some, I want some fresh. There we go. Now look at, see how that changed it? It's a little more opaque, but look at even the color itself is different. It's not quite so green anymore, but look at how that just sort of falls down into the crevices. Take a little bit more of our cobalt maybe. Oh, back here for sure. Just got to be gentle with it. Can't be too much. And then since we've let this be here for a minute or two, we can go back in here again. Let's see, a little bit more of a glaze there. But not a glaze that's going to be running all over the place. Very controlled. A little bit of that fluorescent green in there. Now that may ultimately end up being a lighter color that I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see when we start going back in here with those much lighter colors. And I mean much lighter colors. Because this is, we're really shading the heck out of this object source lighting here. But we need to. Because even this over here, as an example, That's interesting how intense that gets with just a little bit of that white in there. We're gonna get some of our cerulean in here. As a little bit of an example here, and look at the difference that makes, and that is nowhere near white. And you really see it over here. The difference that makes as we bring this back in now. Look at that. Always have to be aware of what you're really putting on the figure. There's what you think you're putting on there, and there's what you're really putting on there. And those can sometimes be two very different things. I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense necessarily. As we get some lights in here again. Look at that. But there's times where you think, oh man, that's really a dark color, and then it's about context, right? you actually kind of take a step back. You go, oh wow, like this. As I put it on here, it's going to look like a highlight. It's going to look like this brilliant, bright object source lighting. And then I put it next to, so here's some of this. I put it next to it. Look at how dark that is. Look at how dark that is. Yet, because we have been so successful in establishing all those darker colors, that looks like we've added something that is a highlight, which is, that's good news, because it means when it comes to real, actual highlights, it means we're going to get ourselves some very nice, rich highlights, instead of just, slightly more light than the other color. And this is where we can start to think about getting this a little lighter too. And this is as much about, I don't want this to be about lightening everything. I also want it to be about those darker glazes too. But sometimes, like here, I'm starting to realize, okay, that needs to be a little lighter, so does that. I don't think I'm going to go that far out here with it, though. I think, now this has a little more of that phthalo. I was kind of keep wanting to say phthalo green, fluorescent green. And I could have put the phthalo green out here, but I wanted to give the cobalt blue a shot because it had that reddishness to it. The phthalo blue and phthalo green, or the either one of those, would have really gone nicely with our fluorescent green, but both of those are so much closer to the original fluorescent green, and I wanted to see, could I manage that temperature difference. So I'm thinking the center of the sword here maybe is where the light is. Same on this side. I'm just going to see what happens. So this is that's our titanium. I can see the difference that's going to make. I need this here to see, well, how much dark is too dark. So again, thinking about the center of that there as I think the focal point for the light that's being emitted. We got some ruffle. That's what this is. I couldn't quite figure out what the heck some of that stuff was. And now that we've established the dark there, you can see how much different our light starts to look. Not going to lose track, though, of my more mid-tone type blue here. And I'm also going to reestablish a little bit of my lighter stuff on the lamp here, or lantern, maybe even on the ground. As subdued as I can make it. See if we can blend that out. Just catch a few little edges. That's all it takes. Sometimes a suggestion is better than hammering them over the head with it. A suggestion can go further than a hammer to the face. Who would have thought? Now, speaking of our midtone, we're going to take some of the fluorescent green and the cerulean blue, and let's go after this arm, the ruffles over here, part of his hand, and even then a little bit of his cloak on this far end, from the extreme far end away from the light source there. Gonna go back with another cobalt blue or a green. This is less of a glaze and more of just pretty much an opaque application at this point. And if it's going to be light there, I'm thinking I can have a bit of a darker tone along this outer edge. Maybe even just a touch more cobalt blue in that. Also thinking about edges too. I want some sharp edges on this. So you can see how much lighter that's getting now that we're starting to put in some of the light. I want to see what's going to happen over here. Yeah. Just let a little bit of my lighter stuff creep in right over here. And this by light, I mean barely a middle tone. I'm going to go back in with some of our darks here again. That's our indigo. Has a little bit of the umber in it. Looking for some serious darks in here. Notice we're not going for something like the ivory black or whatever. I mean, we could, but you'll just lose out on some. You got this big old robe here. Why keep it so uninteresting as to just have a... see, there we go. Grab this is that slightly larger Dick Blick 0. Take some of the paint away. Do a little bit of our blending here. I might even let a little bit of the cobalt blue get into that. And now our edge, it looks like it has light on the other side of it. It's just we had to kind of force the issue there, make it a little bit not just darker, but see, we're getting some of that warmer tone in there as well. Also have to think about this part of the rope casts a shadow on the other part of the rope. There's that aspect of it too. This is where we're just gonna chuck that paint in there. We will grab ourselves something else that we can use as a blending brush here, hopefully. Something nice and soft. Are we on screen? Yes, we are. Back at it with just a little bit of, like right over here. See, we got brush strokes there. We haven't changed the blending of it, but we have taken away some of the brush strokes that were there. So before we get too involved, again, with the lighter stuff and what's supposed to be a shading segment here, We'll just drop a couple of more darker areas on this. And the next segment is really going to be about finding the lightest parts here in our sword, the lightest parts of our object source lighting, the brightest highlights. And then we would kind of finish it off with warmer midtones and that sort of thing. Oh, see, look at that. We're just getting ourselves a little separation between those two parts of the sword, or whatever that's supposed to be. I can see there's some green in there still, which is very nice. Okay. A couple of more midtones where I think maybe that should catch some of the light. Not a lot, just some of it here. Couple little bits along the ruffle, his hand. Maybe the edge of the cloak. And that's it. Okay, so what we're going to do now is really come in here and see what kind of they establish the brightest part of our lighting before then we go back in to some midtones and some other things. And we'll do that next. Let's see what we can do to establish those lightest colors of our glow. And we're just going to go right into the titanium white here, because remember, we can blend this too. We don't have to do a bunch of layers. Yeah, basically sort of a gemstone type of effect here. And remember, we are looking to see if this can be our brightest section right in here. And I don't mind that it's picking up some of the other color that's around there, because that's at least sort of letting me blend it. I don't know at this point how far I want that lightest light to be. Maybe that's enough, maybe it's not. So see, we got light, dark, dark, light, dark. At least that's the idea here. And I'm also going to go back the other way here. I know we're supposed to be working on lighter colors, but I'm going to get some of that darker stuff right there. Just, yep, and we'll do that here too. I'll take some of that away. And you see this little scumbling action that we're doing here? It's another kind of form of blending. Instead of necessarily using the blending brush, we're just going to scumble that in. Now the other side, we had that pretty fairly well established as far as that brightest area here. And here I want it to be especially bright, so I'm going to go back and get some fresh titanium white, and then maybe even here a little bit of just the slightest indication maybe of some light along that line there. And then we'll see what we can do with that same little bit of a scumbling technique again. All it is just kind of, it's a little bit of that Morse code that we're always talking about, not necessarily doing with the brush, but here there's a purpose for it. There's a reason why we're trying to do that. It's not a gratuitous brushstroke action. There's a purpose behind it. Once again, we're going to light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. As long as these are opposite of each other, that should give us a pretty decent result there. And we do have this bit of a gemstone here. We have another kind of a section of his sword over here. Might even thin this down a little bit. And that's more of your traditional thinning down with the liquid there. And let's see just how much lighter we get. See, that can't be quite that light. So we've got this over here. You still have some of this over here. We'll take some of that fluorescent green. I think we'll thin it down. We've plenty of our cobalt blue in it still. Let's catch some of the ruffles here, some of this trim. There's some folds here. We can bring out some of these because remember we were hitting it with our darker glazes. Now we're going to go the opposite way with this. Man, who knows? I may just see something go, you know what? Okay, that can't be quite so bright. Maybe just, and it might even be an area where maybe it would be, but just to make sure there's enough shape and form, maybe we can't have it be quite so bright. Obviously, really focusing in on this hair. Whatever details I can find on the face as well. Maybe, yep, a touch there. His fingers, get this, I don't want to say necessarily darker, but it's certainly not as bright. Certainly not as bright. Let's see what we can do on his knuckles right here. Going to see about potentially, I don't know, that typical sort of reflected light in a gemstone too, maybe. Also going to try and take this cerulean blue / cobalt, move that up a bit, so now that's a little bit softer. Have the quadruple zero here, and that is mostly so that I've got that nice tip that doesn't bend quite so much, and that's going to be handy, I think, for stuff like this. It sure is. And touch of our light on that side. Get ourselves our lighter highlights in here. Starts to pop a little bit more like a gemstone. Hit some brighter stuff on his fingers. Here too. And this is that last 15% or whatever of the lighting that really starts to bring it out and make it dramatic. The hard part of it is to save that last 15% for the last 15% or 10% or whatever, instead of just kind of boom right away. See that the difference all this makes now? A whole different look to it. And it's really just a few brush strokes. A couple of well-placed brush strokes can make all the difference in the world. A few poorly placed brush strokes can also make a whole bunch of difference, just not to the positive side of things. Now this needs some help over here too. So what we'll do is we'll have that be. Then we're going to go back in here with our cobalt blue. Maybe a touch of cerulean in there. So yes, it's darker, but it has this interesting sort of semi-opacity. And then we're going to mix that with our whites. I think now we have a bit more of a transition there. I am actually, I'm going to put some more cobalt blue out here. That is something you'll notice. You kind of go through the cobalt blue a little bit on the faster side. At least that's something I've noticed. And I'm even going to just like I'll put a touch of the indigo in there. And I mean, that's just a tiny little touch. And the idea is just to get a little of that shape in there. Boy, tiniest little bit of indigo in here. And I mean a little bit. Because I would like to have, if I want to have that gemstone sort of look, I've got to have like here, that sort of dark edge, so that then you can do that sort of mid-tone. We certainly, oh my gosh, we need to do that on the other side here for sure. And as I said, ideally putting out phthalo green, that would have really been the color to use, or that the Viridian that's in the starter set of the Winsor Newtons. But I wanted to put the Cobalt Blue out here to see could the possibility of having that reddish tinge in the blue make for even a more interesting contrast with all of the green that's going to be added by the fluorescent green. I'm almost tempted. I might even get a few other darks working here. Like, I'm so tempted. I was just about, nope, we're not going to do it. We'll just leave it at that. Perhaps even a couple of shots of that dark over here. And now back to some lighter tones again. Got this. Grab a little bit of my kind of cerulean blue. And see what we can gather here on just a couple of these fringy things here. That's a highly technical term, fringy things. How much lighter do I want this to be? I don't know, maybe not that much lighter. Let's see if I can pick up that edge right here. Maybe even a little bit lighter on the cloak. Just in a few areas. Again, I want it to mostly be over here. That's the main event right here. This is where we want that stuff to really be focused. I guess you could really consider this to be very much a, and I never liked the limited palette term. It just, well, it suggests that you are limiting yourself. But even here, we've put some purples into this. There's been the ochres, bluish greens, a lot of different tones here, just trying to get some variety in what might be, again, considered to be sort of a limited palette. Here I can see I have to add a little bit more of the thinner to make this want to adhere a little bit more. And then how much lighter do we make these details down here? I mean, some of them are like these little clasps here. That's, I suppose they would be metal, so maybe they do need to have a little touch of the lighter color on them, maybe even this front edge here. And then I'm going to actually go back to our indigo with the umber here. And we'll get ourselves some darks here. I can see we needed a little bit of that's just your pretty much straight up value contrast. A little less of the color contrast, more value contrast, kind of the old-fashioned way, the old-fashioned style of contrast. Perhaps a little bit of shadow on the other side of these. Maybe even here on this side of his hair. Again, at a certain point, you can only get so dark, just like on the other flip side of that, you can only get so light. Which is where that other type of contrast comes in. And let's see if we can't get some of that. We're going to take some of our white here. So this is a much different, so it's almost like a warm grayish color here. And I feel like it's needed in a couple of places here. We've got a lot of same type color, and that just can't be all dark down in there. So you can see what we've done. If I hold it this way, I think you can see the difference now in this area here. Just hit it with that bit of warmth. And we're going to do that again in this fold here too. And you'll see it, boom, right there. So not all about just adding darks, but changing the color around too. So as much as it's interesting to have that dark there, what's more interesting to have a little bit of just a slightly warmer, lighter mid-tone. We're even letting some of that, well, basically sienna getting in there now. So look at that. So see how that cloak starts to change and evolve. We'll get the underside of this, get a little bit of that reflected light in there. It's really, really important. I cannot emphasize that enough. And I know this is supposed to be part of our last segment too, but I just needed to do that. As sometimes as I'm thinking about things, it's just better to do that. So back to our quadruple zero here. Again, this is relatively thin down. I think that's some kind of a trim right there. I just wanted to get that. And then here on this gemstone thing, we've got to make something happen here. So we're going to see if we can thin down our titanium white. I might have to put some new stuff out here. I think I can see what I'm after here. Yep, that going this way. Connect that line. Finish that line. And then a little more here too. I do need some shape up there, so I'm going to get some of my green and my cobalt here. And this is on the other side of the tip of our sword blade right here. This is what we're after. Yeah. It's not much. But now our highlight just stands out. We needed something else there. I also, I believe, have to do a little bit of blending here. Then I also was kind of waiting for the paint to just have a few minutes. I know we did our little scumble blending here, but let's enhance that with some of the more usual soft brush blending. And take that stuff out of there. We'll move it around like this. Whatever's in there, take it out of there again. push this around to smooth that out. I can also see that we need, and maybe not as light as it was on the other side, but this to make it that diamond shape. I need a bright edge there and even a bit more here, and then some of that reflected light in here. That needs to be something that is not quite that color. I'm going to go with perhaps some of my fluorescent green here. Okay, so it's a little lighter, but now actually a color. Sometimes it's not enough to just have it be lighter. Sometimes it needs to be an actual color too. Otherwise, just looks kind of chalky and plain and not a lot of shape. We always want shape, not looking for outlines and lines. We're looking for shape. Catching a couple edges there. How much lighter do we let this get? Maybe about like that, and that's about it. I think that could also benefit from a little bit of a, yeah, just a highlight here. Ever so slight. What is going on with the handle here? Not a bunch. How much more do we let this get lightened up? Maybe about that much. I don't want it to get to be too bright here. So we'll just let this one edge catch some light here and that. This is a metal surface right here. That actually is, we're going to let that hit that edge, and then we're just going to dust in some light here. Oh, where's my, there it is. Couple of little touches on the bamboo here. Maybe, yep. Okay, so our lantern now has a little bit more going on. A little more interest. Again, that's all in shadow there, but I am going to just, while I have this brush going, I want maybe a suggestion of some kind of, not necessarily that light blue. It's kind of a dirty mix of highlights here, basically. And I think that will do it. So the last thing we are going to mess around with now will be some of these things over here, these warmer tones. However much there is to do, maybe there's not a whole lot of that to do. We'll find out. We'll see what happens here as we look to finish off this kind of an area right here. So these areas, this is what we're going to do next. And hopefully this guy will be all finished and ready to go. Well, what's left is not terribly complex. It might be maybe a little hard to reach some areas, but like in here, I'm starting to think I actually need to get a little bit of a glow in there. So I'm just going to grab some kind of remnants of this, and like I said, it's not very much. You can see kind of how dark that's getting. I might just throw a little bit of my center in there to get that to be active, a little more active here, to get the flow more. I'd much rather have to add the thinner to it to get it to flow a little bit more than have it just be all super runny. And yeah, that could just cause a problem. So I think there, see that, just that little extra touch, that's all it is. Boom. No more. No more. Now I want to play here with my that cobalt violet here again. And it's another case of, see here, there's just a lot of similar tones. All you got is that ochre. Now there's something else there. It's just got this other color to it. Let me spending a lot of time here on a part that's not super interesting, but you can still kind of see it. So yeah, so what we're trying to do is kind of augment those ochres with another little color in here, just something else. It's not going to be terribly bright or anything along those lines. And here too, see that? We have two different warm, kind of mid-tone, shadowy colors. Just a little something here. And look what it's a very similar process to what we did towards the beginning, but because this is, the brush is relatively dry and there's not a whole bunch of paint on here, you can see it just sort of blends in there. This is another area of the blind blending that we're talking about. I know this color is lighter than what's there, and I'm just going to, once again, right here, we need something that's just all dark. We can't have that just be all dark. Boom, that's enough there. This could have been anything. We could have taken maybe some of the cadmium red and mixed that with ultramarine or whatever and some white and made this. I would not really, especially if you're just getting started in this, don't be running out and getting the cobalt and that sort of stuff. This is me experimenting here. I just wanted to see, because so far I have to say I'm just haven't been quite so excited about the cobalt, either of the cobalt so far. It's better that, I try and get it and see, is there a real purpose for it, and then tell you, look, just go with this other thing. It's not so much about it always being cheaper. It's just, does it really give you that extra value? Now, then we're changing this up a little bit. We're going to go back to some of that ochre here again. Until that brings that out a little bit, because, well, it's so light on the other side of it. We need some lighter. Yes, it's black, but I mean, look at how much darker this, even by adding this lighter stuff, look how much darker it is than up here anyways. But I think if I can save you maybe a little bit of that painful part of the experimentation process where you go, oh man, why did I even bother getting that? That just didn't work. And if I could do that, well, then so much the better. Now here's another area. I'm going to make sure you can actually see what the heck I'm doing here before I really start. I think you can. It's so dark, you literally can't see anything here. Now this, see? Now you can see something happening there. This is that, you get the ability to just blend in an area. I can't hardly see what the heck I'm even doing here. But as long as the brush can get in there, I've got this really super soft, look at that. Now you can see that. There's this super soft blend right here. If that was acrylics, I mean, there would be some lighter color in there, but it would just be a mess. You could pretty much see that I just, well, tried to stick a brush in there and have something happen. And now I think you can start to see the warmth of this side, the coolness of this side. I think that's really starting to show itself there. Now we're going to go, let's see how much lighter we can take this. I think we've added a lot of these sort of deep mid-tone. We can go with some lighter stuff going on here, especially on these couple of these parts right here. Yes, it is supposed to be black. However, you'd be surprised at how much of a highlight black can get when the lighting source is right. When the light is right. It's the game of lighting. And here we get a little bit of stippling almost. I really don't necessarily know what's going on with his shoes there, but and there's stuff you can't see, so that is why I'm not even going to bother with it. I mean, it's quite literally, yeah, this is all covered, so you can't see it, so I'm not going to waste your time painting something you can't see. Now, even if this is going to have a decent amount of lighting on it, I think you can see the difference color-wise. You got that blue here, and you know what? That needs to actually be toned down a bit. So that gets interesting, because we'll take our green and our cobalt here. It's relatively dry. Let's see how we're just kind of toning that down a bit. It's not a glaze, not a glaze. It's actually just kind of an opaque version of our lighter color. I'm going to get this paint out of this brush here. And I think you can see that. Yeah, and we're looking, just pull this up here a little bit, soften that so it's not just a highlight across the edge. We don't want just a nasty old highlight. We want something more than that. Once again, I'm going to see what I can do right in here with some of the folds. His boot here. Can you see all that? Yes, you can. Maybe this is more lighting than it deserves, or more whatever. Sometimes what the reality of something would be has to be subservient to just making it look visually more exciting, especially something that is this small. It's you can try and do all the realistic stuff you want, but after a while, the realism starts to get in the way. And you, instead of just realism, you end up with something that's just not terribly interesting to look at. I guess maybe vehicles is where the realism really benefits most. With sometime with miniatures, the realism kind of well, why did you bother painting a fantasy thing? Heck, even sometimes with historicals, the realism can almost get in the way. I hope that makes some sense, but it really can. You just you end up losing a lot of potentially interesting things just in the name of realism. Realism in your basing. Let's say your flock and foliage. Now that I did learn actually has an impact. It's not necessarily bad to have as much realism as possible in your foliage and your landscape, that sort of thing. This here also going to make that darker, because I want the light to focus over here, and then all of a sudden I'm looking at the back of his head, and it's just, how the heck did it get that light? I didn't want him to have white here. He's supposed to have darker here. I have to admit, I do somewhat like that cobalt blue and the indigo together. But to be honest, I probably could have done that just with some phthalo blue. Perhaps, yeah. Now, Prussian blue is a little bit more. There's just kind of a lot of black in the Prussian blue. So, see, look, I'm just getting a separation in the hair, making that a touch darker. What about this even here? Yeah, this one is kind of lost track of our edge over here. Go back. I'm going to grab some of this cerulean blue here. I think that should help. And now there is my fluorescent green. All right. That has helped. We now need to think about an edge to our sword blade. I just realized there's like no edge to our sword blade. This will be interesting. But our quadruple zero and the fact that it doesn't collapse on us should be helpful. Okay, now we got a little edge there. Then we got to do the same over here. Bring this edge straight down there. Boom. Okay, that was another thing that was missing a little bit here. And I think we've got that in there. I might want a couple of lighter touches on his hair. Once I put those darks in there, I thought, it does maybe leave room for... And these are just a couple little... It's almost like the chain of highlights that we talk about with the metals. See that? Those three right there. So it's kind of a stair-step line of those highlights. Very targeted. Really, really targeted. I think these could be lighter as well. Oh, gee, yes. These could most certainly be lighter. Maybe down here, carry those lines out a bit farther. I think we'll get this one fold here. Ooh, yeah, that. I'll try and I'll see if I can give him an eye here. This is something we may have to do separately, but let's try it. Okay, well, he's got an eye now. At least the whites of his eye. I think that is picked up now. Yeah, I do realize that what can happen with the camera, it can have a little bit of an issue picking up the subtle differences in the greens, well, the greens and the blues, so to speak. It doesn't necessarily pick those up terribly easy. Now here, I'm just going to do some warmer lights here. That's the brush I'm looking for. And the idea is let this blend with all that color that we put there before. It's been there for an hour-ish, something like that, so that's why we can put this on here and it just blends nicely instead of tearing away, because that is what's going to happen if you keep diving into that same color over and over again and keep attacking it. The paint will just literally come away, or you get mud. One of those two things, and neither of those things are what you want. I think we're even going to get just a bit more in here. Perhaps even here too. It's very, very subtle. I think, yes, you can see this here. Good. It's got a little lightness to it, but it also really does change the color. This is one of our last major things here to do something with. There's just absolutely nothing happening in here. And there's a whole bunch of folds here. However, they're supposed to be kind of in shadow. This is where using these warmer colors, I think, is going to help. Going with the warmer tones. Because what's on either side of it? Those cool bluer tones. So we getting a little bit of that contrast by default. And here there was a little bit of a thing where the resin kind of snapped away, so I had to truncate that shape a little bit. There's supposed to be more there, but yeah, though a little bit of there was this bit of air spot in the resin there, and I just decided to cut it away and file a lot of it away. So this is going to be just as much about, you know what? I'm saying this here, boy, if I can, we'll see if we can do this here. We're going to try with what remains of our lighter stuff here. Let's get some of our cobalt, some of our green, more of the cobalt. As much as I would like to not do something, I'm looking at the way this sword is here, and I think I have to put some here. It's not going to be a lot. Look how, even at this point, look how much of the darker tone just got in there. And this is not very light either. I mean, this is more like object source midtone right here. Isn't that object source lighting? Almost sounds like a crime drama or something. And this over here, I've got that patch of light. We have to distribute that somewhat more even. There we go. Yep. I'm glad I waited though. It sure made that easier to push around. So I have to say I do like the combination of the cobalt blue with the phthalos or the fluorescent green, but I would definitely I definitely want to give this something like this a shot with with phthalo blues and stuff. Now the reason I just didn't do that here is because the phthalos that I have are from the starter set as opposed to say the genuine phthalos, and I would like to experiment with those. I do have some. Let's see. And I just forgot what the heck. Williamsburg hand mixed paint. We'll see what hand mixed paints really are. That's what they claim. And there's also some Gamlin colors. So I got some different brands of paints. And as soon as those are here, and as soon as I can make a batch of my pre-mixed oil things here, I was going to make a video of those. So when those arrive, I will be making a video out of that. And that'll be for his. I'll try and throw this out there as fast as I can for you guys so you can even just see that part of it, just that mixing part. Do they really seem all that different even in the mixing phase before we've ever even painted with them? But I do want to say thanks to everybody for supporting these, whatever the level is. It certainly makes a difference, and I wouldn't be able to get, well, like a batch of paints to experiment with. That is all. The only way that could happen is being sourced through the Patreon page. And that is why I try to throw in every type of experiment. I am trying to get some things prepped for TMM and oils. That's going to be the next big experiment, and obviously I'm pretty sure that the Necrons are the best candidate for that. So that is another big experiment that's coming. I'm just going to get a little lighter here. I think it'll work. The tests, the small scale tests that I did worked very well. We'll see how it works on a slightly larger scale. And then hopefully, ultimately, some army painting series done based on, well, some TMM. I'll just get myself a nice big old, nice soft dry brush here. That's as much going after brush strokes. It's less about blending the paint. It's more about just taking away some of the brush strokes, because I can see some right over here. It just softens that. I can see some brush stroke texture over here. It softens that, because we got these nice soft bristles here. Same here. Obviously, on the larger surfaces like cloaks, that works really well. That's where you kind of have to find the equivalent in some smaller brushes. That is why I'm liking the zero over here as a basically a, yes, it's I apply the paint with it too, but it also has been working really well as a blending brush. So don't be surprised if you see some more of these type of things as well. And then a little more smoothing out in a couple other places. And I think we are good to go here. So again, thanks everybody for supporting this. You can really see some of those nice smooth blends that we got there. And I'll catch you on the next On the Workbench session, which could it's going to probably be mixing more of those new oils. So I look forward to that, and hopefully you do too. Thanks again, everybody.